So the verbal NDA for Ashes of Creation just dropped, and while I have participated in several alpha tests over the past few years, I think it's most important to talk about the latest one that just took place this weekend. So let's jump right into it. So even though I'm about to talk about the gameplay, I just want to make it very clear that these latest tests were done for the purpose of stress testing, and by no means were they about showing off the game's content, which is still very much a work in progress. So I joined a server called Norlin, launched the game, and I was greeted with the character customization. Currently there's only 4 playable races, being the Kalar and Valoon humans, the Empyrean elves, and the Dunir dwarves. There's only 3 playable primary classes at the moment, being Cleric, Mage, and Tank, and you can only pick one, instead of combining 2 as is expected on release. I was happy to see that each race has its own unique armor sets for each class, sort of like what you see in Elder Scrolls games. As for actually customizing your character's appearance, there isn't much of that yet, as all you can really do are select a few different facial and hair presets, although I do know that the devs plan to have their customization be on par with Black Desert's by the time of release, so take that as you will. So jumping into the world, we all spawned at the same Divine Gateway, which are basically going to be the server's starting points that are going to be spread around the world map. And there was a small encampment of NPCs surrounding this place. There were a series of quests to do in the area, and many were your pretty standard MMO quests, like talk to that person, kill X amount of whatever, walk here, interact with that, you get the idea. Although there was one quest that I was very pleased to see. Very early on, you get a quest that simply just tells you to find a place to settle in the forests, mountains, deserts, etc. So I basically ditched everything else and I pursued this quest as I figured this was the one that gets you settled into a node. The first day of the test, all I could find were a bunch of flat empty lots, and to be frank, the world felt pretty dull without any sort of civilization around. But this changed on my second day of testing, as when I logged in, I discovered that one of these empty lots had suddenly become a level 3 node. Now, level 3 nodes are supposed to be in the village stage, but its size was more akin to a town or a small city, which was pretty impressive. The buildings within this town weren't totally random or just for aesthetics either, as I found that there were still buildings under construction and there were even empty lots with signs that said, "Only the mayor has permission to build here." That's right, there's already mayors in the alpha. There was also apparently housing in the game that a few players purchased, but I was way too poor to afford it. There were even some player politics going on in this city, as apparently the mayor who was elected in this town won by only 4 votes, and she had been bribing people by offering to pay them 100 gold if they voted for her, just like in real life. At one point, the whole population of the town was gathered around the center, and suddenly someone ran up behind the mayor and assassinated her, and then I immediately ran up and looted her corpse for 24 stone. Also from this node, you could purchase a variety of different mounts that I'm sure you might have seen on some of the dev streams. And I'm just going to name some animals here and some other shit, like horses, foxes, tortoises, deer, rhinos, bears, otters, lizards, griffins, Kirins, and a bunch of other stuff. Mounts have their own separate abilities from yours, including a sprint, and they're pretty vital to traveling around this world, as you can imagine. It took me forever just to explore some of the alpha map on foot, and I couldn't imagine traveling on a full map without a mount. As for armor and crafting, there were merchants that you could buy some decent looking armor sets from, and I know that some players earn some cool sets from doing quest lines. You could also craft some weapons and armor if you had the right materials, but sadly I did not. There are also caravans in the alpha, albeit very buggy. It was cool to see them actually moving to other nodes though, but I did see dozens of them stuck in the ground or lying on their sides. While they definitely need more work and will probably be improved on in the future, it was awesome to see them kind of working this early on in the game. While there's currently no official professions in the game yet, there is resource gathering such as harvesting / herbalism, mining, woodcutting, and fishing, and each has different tiers of resources that require higher tiers of tools in order to harvest them. At first, I didn't expect to see any boats at this stage of the game, but that didn't stop me from looking. So I went to the coast and I kept running, and eventually I saw it. I discovered a very, very scuffed, ugly-ass boat, roughly the size of a sloop, and I immediately jumped on board. Now, this boat is incredibly early in development because there wasn't any real way to interact with it. You couldn't grab hold of the wheel, you couldn't mess with the sails, there's no cannons, but there was something really interesting about it still. Because me and a random guy who also jumped on board discovered that there's actually physics applied to the boat and water. You see, the devs are currently working on having buoyancy effects in the water, and the current ocean in the alpha actually has waves that rise and fall. Now, the motions of these waves actually rocked and pushed our boat around, even flooding it with water and almost sinking it a few times, which was pretty fucking terrifying. Me and this random guy also discovered that we could steer it by pushing the sides of it with our own characters, so we ended up pushing this random boat from the shore halfway across the playable ocean, as pirates do. So while me and my first mate were deep in the Atlantic, the entire server was suddenly transported to a raid boss, being the Elder Dragon of the Woods, which you might have seen on the AOC stream already. The whole server, we just speed ran this dragon and we killed it in about 15 seconds, and then we killed the fire one in about 4 seconds because the dev that spawned it forgot to add a few more zeros to his health bar. After that, the devs flagged everyone in the area for PvP, and they created a massive war zone where we got to test some of the large-scale PvP battles, and it wasn't bad for an alpha. Going into the combat, if you don't remember what the action combat was like during the Battle Royale test, you can check out my previous video, but it's become more blended since then, with some attacks being targeted and others having to be aimed, and the basic attack is your choice of tab targeted or free aim. Although I'd say that it leans a little more heavily on the tab-targeted side of things now. And when it comes to class combat, the mage was your pretty standard spellcasting DPS with some pretty beautiful animations on some of the spells. Some of their moves include a fireball, a meteor shower, blink, mana draining, a black hole that sucks off your enemies, and hyper beam. The tank was, your standard tank with a charge ability that trips their opponents, a death grip, lasso, hook, grab kind of move, a bleed, moves that increase block chance and damage mitigation, counter attacking, etc., and smashy AoE abilities. And while I didn't get to play a cleric, I saw while raiding and PvPing that it has a pretty cool range of abilities, and of course many of them being heals and regens, but they also have some debuffs and life-draining combat spells. And then the servers closed right after that. But yeah, that's my experience. I tried to cover and explore as much as possible, and honestly, I was pleasantly surprised with things that I didn't even know were in the game yet. And I got to meet some pretty cool players along the way. But with that being said, the game still has a really long way to go, and while I am excited, and I'm sure you guys are too, I encourage you to keep your expectations low so that you can be happier about the more you get to see moving forward. Thank you.